Hey guys, this is Jeff Stanek with Figured Out Baseball. I've got a great Figured Out Baseball podcast today. I'm kind of re-energized. I haven't recorded one of these in a while. I've been out scouting and coaches are playing, so I took a little hiatus, but really excited to record this one today. We've got a bit of a different kind of guest on here. A lot of times we're joined by either college or pro coaches. Occasionally we get people that are off the field, and that's what we're dealing with today. Not someone who's totally away from the field, but just someone who's not currently coaching anywhere. We're being joined by China McCarney, who I think you're going to be really excited to hear what he's got to say. He is the vice president and CEO of Jaeger Sports. So I'm assuming that most, if not all of you, have heard of Jaeger bands, J bands, if you play baseball or coach baseball, and that's Jaeger Sports, and this guy is the VP and CFO of the company. He's been a part of Jaeger Sports in some capacity since 2008. He became the vice president of the company in 2014, became their CFO officially in 2019. He's a pretty darn good baseball player as well. Back in his day, he played at 3 different colleges, but was drafted out of College of the Canyons, a junior college in California, was drafted in the 29th round in 2008, was drafted again in the next year out of Cal State Northridge in the 33rd round by the Rays. He graduated from Cal State Northridge with a degree in psychology, which is definitely something we're going to talk about at some point. Never ended up playing affiliated minor league ball, but did play 1 year of independent baseball, which also might be something we get into. In addition to the work he does with Jaeger Sports, China is also the founder of Athletes Against Anxiety and Depression. It's something that you should definitely check out if that's ever something that you've gone through personally, or if you have players that are dealing with anxiety and depression, or you just want to know more about that as a coach and know how to deal with that, deal with players who are going through those things more. You can check out Athletes Against Anxiety and Depression at AAADF.org. He's also the author of several books, one called Tell Your Story, which is about just being proud of who you are as a player and not being ashamed of some things that you've gone through. Also an author of a book called Off the Field. He will also be releasing a mental health, the mental health manual. I believe he said in June of this year. All of those will be available on Amazon. There'll also be information about all those books on the website. Again, it's AAADF.org. China McCarney, thank you for being on the podcast with us today.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me, and I feel like I learned something about myself in the bio there.
I hope so. I guess that means I did a decent amount of background, or at least enough background on you. China and I have talked several times before this podcast, just trying to get to know each other, and really hoping that he does some video for the website. If you have not checked out the Figured Out Baseball website in the past, I would really encourage you to do so. It's a platform where we've got more than 500 free videos and podcasts where we try to help players, coaches of players, and parents of players, really in every subject on and off the field. Of course, we cover on-field subjects like hitting, pitching, defense, base running. We cover off-the-field things like mental strength. We have full-weight programs that can be downloaded, and nutrition information, a lot of other stuff. There is a paid portion of the website, but a lot of stuff for free on there, a lot of really good resources, and I'm hoping that China will be contributing to some of those with a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today. China, if I could just start with I usually like to start with something from the bio that stands out, and for you there are several things that I'd like to talk about, but just the amount of time you've been with Jaeger Sports is pretty awesome, that you've been there for that long with one company and have continued to move up. Would you mind telling everybody, just to kind of start things off here, tell us exactly how you got involved with Allen Jaeger and how you became such an integral part of Jaeger Sports?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely unique, and I feel incredibly blessed to really have only worked with one company. My dad saw an ad for a Jaeger Sports camp in 1999 when I was 12 years old. We were at a car wash, and there was like an ad taken out in the back of a paper or something, and signed me up and went to my first Jaeger Sports camp as a 12-year-old. And just fell in love with the physical part of the program. I loved the bands. I loved how that made my arm feel. And on the last day of that camp, Allen Jaeger came out and kind of saw me throwing and talked to my dad and I and just said that he wanted to stay in touch, and he kind of became my mentor, which I don't know if you can get more lucky than that, to have that man as your mentor at such a young age. And so he kind of followed me throughout my playing career. And once I got to about 16 or 17 years old, he actually had me kind of travel with them and do the long toss demonstrations. And then once I was out of college, asked me if I wanted to come on board to the business side. And so, yeah, 1999 to 2021, that's 22 years already, which is insane. And so when I first started, they had black bands only with a 3-part clasp. Now we have just the 1-part carabiner and 28 colors of J-bands. And I kind of sort of compare it to somebody that works at a restaurant and starts washing dishes and then works their way up to being one of the chefs. That's kind of how I feel my journey's gone with Jaeger Sports. I've done a little bit of anything and everything, and still do to this day. We have a small team, which we love, to keep it that way, and we kind of all do a little bit of everything to keep the engine turning and keep those arms healthy and getting bands out to everybody.
So the arm health is a big part of what I want to talk about on this podcast. And for people that maybe aren't that familiar with J-bands, or people that know what they are but have not used them before, can you just kind of talk through how and why J-bands are effective in keeping people's arms healthy? Like, why is it so important in your eyes? And obviously you experienced this as a player, and now you're selling something that you used to use. Why is it important? Why is it something that people should look into if they're not using them right now? Like, how do Jaeger bands help to keep pitchers and position players, how do they help to keep arms healthy?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And basically any resistance bands out there came about I think back in the 70s or 80s, once they started using resistance bands to rehab the shoulder complex or arms after surgery. And so Allen's curiosity in the 90s was, what if you take a healthy arm, an arm that hasn't been cut on, and you do that same resistance program to get the healthy arm stronger and more healthy and kind of avoid the avoidable injuries. And so they just kind of started doing research and messing with the design. And basically the reason bands in general, but we're talking about J-bands obviously here, are so good is they target the throwing specific muscle groups before you throw. So any sort of static stretch or anything that you do, it's very hard to target, like the rotator cuff complex, the little muscles and science above my head and the elbow. It's very hard to target those without bands. And the reason we love our bands, obviously, is the wrist cuffs. It seems like a very simple thing, but the wrist cuffs, strapping those around your wrist as opposed to holding a ball, like you've seen resistance bands with balls or handles. Anytime you grab anything, like if you just grab your palm right now, you make a fist, you can see your forearm tense up. You can see your veins. You can see those muscles activated. So when you wrist cuff, you put a wrist cuff and your hand's able to stay relaxed, stretching a relaxed arm. And it's focusing on the proper, muscles, ligaments, all that stuff that we're trying to target. And so I would say that the most important feature of doing resistance bands and J-bands in particular is they are targeting the throwing specific muscle groups before you throw, which any activation, heat, blood flow, stuff like that is going to put you in a much more healthy and prepared state to perform the act of throwing. It's just like stretching your legs before you run. You would never run like a timed 60-yard dash without getting your legs ready. You should never throw or do anything overhand without first prepping those specific muscle groups for that act.
And what you just said there, I think, is something that people only really started to think about, or maybe just at lower levels, or at least how I was, brought up. When you were a kid, you just went to you show up to the field and you did a little static stretch, maybe a little jog, a little static stretch, and you started to throw. And it wasn't really until I got to college that I started hearing that you were supposed to get warm before you throw, the mentality for at least me as a kid and my teammates and my coaches was that you throw to get warm, you throw to get loose, and now it's kind of the opposite. So that's something that's so important that I still think with my limited involvement, in the high school baseball age range, whether it's high school ball or travel ball, there still aren't enough coaches that understand that. There are a lot of coaches that do understand that. There are a lot of coaches that travel with J-bands. I did for my 1 year as a high school coach, we traveled with them. I went to scout a game yesterday, and one of the teams had them there, but the other one didn't. And I'm guessing that the other coach just either doesn't know about it or doesn't buy into it or whatever. There's still coaches that just don't know enough about this subject and enough about, getting those throwing specific muscles loose before you step on a field and the importance of that. And it's amazing to me, China, I don't know if you've seen this over the years, but just like it seems like what people do in rehab will end up starting a trend once people look into it. Like whatever guys are doing for rehab, if you do that as a healthy individual, then you have a chance to have some serious gains without ever getting hurt. Because I think how a lot of that starts is that guys will get hurt, they'll rehab, and they'll come back better than they were. And then the question is obviously, well, why are they better now than they were after surgery? And it's usually the answer is because of that rehab, and through the rehab process, you're targeting specific muscles that you didn't before, or doing some different exercises or whatever that you hadn't before that ends up making you stronger when you come back. And that's what obviously J-bands want to do, is to strengthen those muscles from the beginning. If I can ask you another question, this is still something that I wonder, and I don't know what the right answer is exactly, or if there is a specific answer. Maybe there isn't one from your end either. At what age or ability level or development level should kids start to use J-bands? Like, should we be seeing these at Little League games? Should we be seeing these at, 100% of high school level games? Or is it earlier or later, or just what? I mean, do you guys have an answer to that, or is there anyone? Do you have any advice for people listening to this?
Yeah. So, excuse me. There's definitely that question comes up a lot, and there's not like a concrete one answer. When you're 9 years old, you need to start. We have junior bands, which are half the tension of the adult bands, and we say that for ages 12 and under. We've had kids as young as 8 come to the camps and do a great job. The issue at that age isn't so much physical. It's more, can they mentally stay focused on the exercise and do the exercises correctly with the proper form and everything. But the earlier you start, the better you get, obviously, like anything else. The better you get with the form, the more your body kind of gets acclimated to it before your body starts to develop and get bigger and everything like that. And so I wish I could give you an age, but if you have like a dedicated 8, 9, 10-year-old that wants to do it, they can do it. If they don't, there's no detriment to not doing it at that age. Let's just say that. But once you start getting 12, 13, 14, your body starts to develop, growth plate. We hear a lot about growth plate issues and stuff like that. You should be doing arm activation before you do the act of throwing, like 100%. Like you said, the thing should 100% of high school. In my opinion, absolutely, yes, and that's not because I care about selling J-bands. It's just we care about the health, and whatever resistance band you use, once you start to get to that 13, 14 age group, do something to get blood flow, heat, range of motion to the throwing specific muscle groups before you pick up a baseball to throw, because you can avoid so much of the avoidable injuries. There's not as much setback, there's not as much soreness, and you can train and get better and stronger. And that's where the strength part of our program comes from. Like, the majority of it is just from being healthy and getting to know your arm and getting to know your body, and where you can push, how hard you can train, which adds velocity, adds endurance, all that good stuff.
Couple things there that I really want to get into, but I'm going to start with a couple other things that I wanted to ask before that answer. There was a really good answer, by the way. The resistance level of these things, I think, is important for people to know and to have a grasp on, especially if someone's using something besides J-bands, which, I mean, this isn't a commercial for J-bands, but at the same time, J-bands are the most popular bands you can find out there, but there are other resistance bands in existence. You can go to, I imagine, at least I've seen these in the past, I imagine you can go to most any sporting goods store and find some sort of resistance bands, like exercise type resistance bands. Probably going back to those rehab days, like you can go to rehab somewhere and get some sort of resistance bands. I think it's important though for people to understand the resistance level and understand just like how intense these exercises are. So these arm exercises that guys are going through before they throw, is it meant to be difficult? Is it meant to be like, this isn't like lifting weights where you should do reps until failure? Like, this is just to sort of activate these muscles. Is that correct, or am I off on that, or is there a better way that you can talk about the resistance level and just, I guess, how difficult this should be when guys are going through these exercises to make sure that the arm is properly being warmed up but not pushed too far?
No, that's beyond a perfect question, because when we go out to games, we see guys stretching these things out, and it like beyond where they're supposed to be, and it just scares us. Number one, it can put the band in a vulnerable position, but I just love that you asked that question, because it's vital for the listener. So it's a stretching routine. It is not a workout routine. It's a preparation routine. You should feel like we advise to work up to 25 reps. I was always kind of in the sweet spot between 15 and 20. And so on your last 3 or 4 reps, you might feel a little burn. You don't want it to be where your body's struggling, you're getting tense and everything like that. It's comfortable. It's a stretching routine, just like any other stretch that you do. You're in tune with your body. You know what feels right, what doesn't feel right. And so if you go into it with that mindset, this is a preparation exercise, I'm stretching my arm to go throw, then you're not going to be 20 feet from the fence, stretching the band out like crazy, holding your breath, veins popping out. Like, that's not what we're looking for here. This is not a workout routine. So that's a great question. As far as the tension goes, the exact answer on that, we have the answer from our manufacturer, obviously. Junior bands are about 5 pounds of resistance at full stretch. Take that for what you will, because when I hear it, it's like, what's full stretch? Does that mean full stretch when the band's going to snap? And then adult bands are double that. They're 10 pounds of resistance at full stretch. So if you're looking, if you couldn't find J bands or you needed something else and you had resistance bands, if you had a 5-pound resistance band and a 10-pound resistance band, they would mimic basically the junior and the adult bands. And the tension's always going to be dictated by you based on your distance away from the anchor point. So if you stay close, like I always recommend, especially when you first get them, almost stay as close to the fence as you can with very limited tension. Try the exercises, inch your way out, and you'll kind of feel that sweet spot, which is the fun part of the journey, I think, in athletics. For anything, not J-bands or anything, it's just kind of figuring out, trial and error, what works for your body.
And this is a really important part of using the bands, because if you turn it into a workout routine where you maybe have some bands that are, maybe a guy like tries Jaeger bands and says like, wow, this isn't enough resistance for me. Like, I'm strong. I lift weights. Like, I need something that has more resistance than this. And they get some bands that have more of a resistance. You can actually impede your progress there, right? Because you might end up tearing some muscles down before you start throwing for the day, which if you're on the mound, 100 pitches, that you're tearing your arm up there, which is why you get sore the next day, which is why you need time between starts. But you can actually hurt your progress, right, if you don't use these things right and you use them with too much resistance. Or like if a young kid if a 12-year-old, 11-year-old uses the larger bands and has just too much going on with the shoulder during this activation process, it will be, just like anything out there, but it could hurt progress instead of make progress. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. And there's 2 things that'll happen. Is one, if there's too much tension and you can happen to keep the right form, and it is activating those shoulder complexes, it's going to, like you said, it's going to tear it down, it's going to get sore, it's going to get tired, and then you're going to go throw. So you're like double negatively affecting the muscles and the things that you're trying to help. And the other thing that'll happen that we see a lot too is if there's too much tension on the bands, your body is designed to help you. So nature will take over, and instead of activating the shoulder complex and the muscles that we're trying to attack in a good way, your pecs will take over, your back, your lats will take over, your bigger muscles will take over to help you move the bands, and then we're not accomplishing anything there. Your biceps, your pecs, the bands aren't going to be enough tension to really strengthen them, and then your shoulder's not going to be activated because your bigger muscles are taking over. So you definitely want to make sure you're using the right tension. It's not a workout, and just know it's preparation, and you should be feeling it right in the – if you don't feel it when you're doing the elevated external where you're pulling away from the fence, that's the one. I just did it right now without bands, and I can feel it in my shoulder. If you don't feel it when you're doing that one, then you know you've got to make an adjustment and focus back on the form or whatnot.
So if I were to buy Jaeger bands right now for myself, for my son, for my team, whatever, where would I find a program to to show me the various exercises that are recommended by you all, just so I'm not, sort of having to make stuff up on the fly? Where, if anywhere, can I find like an official program of how to use J-bands?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So if you buy them from JaegerSports.com, it will come with a brochure with all 11 exercises, all of the instructions, what to do, what not to do, how to strap in, how to do it safely, all that good stuff. If you buy it from Amazon, it's a different instruction sheet, but it's the same language, same verbiage. If you buy it from Dick's Sporting Goods, there's a one sheet in the box that'll have everything. If you don't have the instructions with your J-bands, you don't have to worry. If you just go to JaegerSports.com, under the J-bands tab, there's a web page, totally free. It's a free download. Free, you don't even have to download it. It's a web page as well. But it's the J-band exercise sheet. It goes through all 11 exercises, what to do, what not to do, how to do it safely, and you can download that. And so, like we were discussing earlier, if you can't get a J-band, but you get your hands on some sort of resistance band or TheraBand or anything like that, you can still go to JaegerSports.com, go to the J-bands tab, and get that free exercise sheet, just so you know kind of what baseball or softball specific exercises to activate that complex before you throw.
Awesome. Okay, one other thing I want to talk about before I still want to go back to the answer you had for several questions back about, but we'll get to that in a minute. A lot of kids now are going through pregame, especially pitchers, are going through pregame warm-ups using plyo balls, weighted plyo balls. What is the relationship, if any, between J-bands and weighted balls? Is it okay to use both? Do you recommend using one or the other? Does Jaeger not try to get involved much with that? I'm asking this question, China, just to try to give listeners to this the most and best information possible. Like if someone's already gotten onto, a program where they're, a pitcher's loosening up with plyo balls and doing like the sort of standard, 3, 4, 5 exercises that guys do pregame before they're going to start with weighted plyo balls. Where in that progression do J-bands fit? If there is any, if there should be any correlation between the two, or if they're separate and should not be used together. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'll give two answers. I'll give the company answer and I'll give my personal answer. The Jaeger Sports company answer. So we are partners with Driveline Baseball. We love what they do. But if somebody calls us about weighted balls, we do not answer because we don't make weighted balls. We don't teach weighted balls. So we always just send to the professionals to get that information. So from a Jaeger Sports perspective, we would say if you are going to do weighted balls, make sure you do your bands and get your arm as prepped and ready to go before you pick up the weighted ball. My personal answer, I used weighted balls when I played, but I never used them during the season. They weren't as mainstream as they are now. I used them more in the off season. I had a professional pitching coach helping me I never threw a weighted ball by myself. I had a professional watching me, making sure I was doing everything right, because it's a touchy situation throwing something that heavy overhand, which is already an unnatural movement. And then the only thing I would do during the season is the 2-pound ball. I would throw up against the fence maybe 6 to 8 times right before I picked up the ball to throw in the bullpen, the baseball, because I just loved the way the baseball felt in my hand after throwing that weighted ball. The baseball felt like a ping pong ball. It was tiny. And so my advice to anybody out there that's using them or wants to use them or find out anything about them would be go to someone that knows what they're doing. Hopefully they're certified with the weighted ball program. They've gone through Driveline or the Texas Baseball Ranch or something like that has professionals kind of teaching it. And then anything you're going to do, it's just like throwing. We would never let somebody throw without doing arm circles and J-bands first. So if you're going to do some sort of weighted ball program, the J-bands would fit in before that. You would activate your whole body, get your arm really loose and warm before you ever picked up a weighted ball to throw it.
I thought it was an important question to ask. I appreciate that answer. And I know you're not I know you guys don't sell them. You're not, the professional there, but I just wanted to I think it's important for people that are listening to this to know, okay, if I'm going to use J-bands, can I still use weighted balls? Can I still do what I was doing there? Or do I need to just pick one or the other? Because obviously, again, you don't, those fine muscles in your shoulder especially are so fine that you want to make sure you don't overdo it, obviously.
Right. Absolutely. No, it's a great question. And it's and we didn't talk about anything we were going to talk about on the podcast, which is the way I love to do it. And the questions that you're asking are literally the questions we get from coaches, from dads. I get all the emails that come at info@Jaeger Sports or help at Jaeger Sports. They come to me personally, and these are the questions I'm answering a lot. So it's good because this is the information that people want. And weighted balls is definitely a hot topic that comes up where there is some confusion out there in the space. So it's good that we covered that.
I got a dad brain, I guess, with 3 little ones at home. That's I think like a dad nowadays. So I want to go back to China, something that you said several answers ago about getting to know your arm and your body. And that is something that I've heard Allen say for years. And I don't know, social media or things I've read about him or whatever, or guys that I have coached with that know Allen. But it's something I've heard for a long time. And, for me, I've used the term with my players before about just, listen to your arm, get to know your arm, listen to your arm. And those are Allen Jaeger things, at least in my opinion. Maybe other guys have said them along the lines, but to me, those are things I've heard from Allen and things I kind of carry with me now. And I've seen some tremendous progress with guys who did a good job of that. But that's not something that you can, really quantify for in a podcast like this. However, I would like you to talk about it, if you can, about exactly what you mean when you say that as a baseball player, pitcher or position player, that you need to get to know your arm and get to know your body, because that's when you will really, as you've said it several times, kind of find the sweet spot with using these bands, using weighted balls, heck, even probably getting in the weight room, during the season. I don't know that there's one specific answer of how often guys need to lift during the season. I think it depends a lot on just your individual feel, and it's about getting to know your arm and your body. But let's specifically now talk about getting to know your arm and this phrase that like just runs through my mind of listen to your arm from day to day. You're in your season as a baseball player, or you're a coach and you're trying to coach a whole team, and a whole team doesn't need, everybody in the team's not going to need the same program, the same throwing program. They're not going to be able to go the same intensity every day. You're going to have 2 pitchers side by side who are both starters and both throw 90 pitches on a particular day, and the next day they're going to feel totally different and they're going to be able to do different things. So can you just talk a little bit about this phrase, listen to your arm, get to know your arm and your body as well, but maybe just talk about that a little bit, what exactly that means, and how you can tangibly take that phrase and use it on a day-to-day basis as a baseball player to keep your arm in the best, as healthy as it can be, but also to strengthen it as much as possible? Because I've seen two-sport athletes in high school, or just two or three sport athletes in high school that, don't play baseball year-round. When they are playing baseball, if they do a good job of listening to their arm day-to-day on a long toss program, they'll see tremendous gains just from the first day they come to baseball practice after basketball, or when football is over officially and they want to start coming to baseball from then until the end of the season. They'll see just tremendous gains right there if they do a good job of this. Now, I'm going to turn it over to you, the expert here, Allen. Just for people listening to this, Allen specifically told me that China would do a great job and was as qualified or more qualified than him to talk about long toss programs, arm care programs, and all that. So China, it's in your court. Let's talk about just getting to know your arm and why that's important for arm health and making progress in arm strength.
Yeah, so my adrenaline's starting to go in a great way, because now we're gonna get into the nitty gritty kind of discipline part. And listen to your arm, to me, I've heard that. It gives me goosebumps. I've heard that for so long, and kind of developing a relationship just with that phrase. Because you hear it and it's like, okay, what do you want me to put my ear up to my shoulder? What am I listening for? Like, what? But it embodies Jaeger Sports program as a whole, but really like anything you want out of life, you have to just get in. You have to dive in. You have to have discipline, and you have to learn from the process, right? So in baseball especially, and it's gotten so much better now, which is so great, but if you were having this conversation 10 years ago, there's so many more programs with cookie cutter, 10 minutes of throwing, 120 feet, whatever it is, and putting an entire roster on the same throwing program, and you're just setting yourself up for failure if that's the way you do things. You've got to allow the athlete to have individual, freedom within the constraints of a program, because it's not like we roll out of camp and we say, okay, guys, go throw. We give them the structure. We talk about how to properly go out, the stretching out phase, how to properly come in with the pull down phase. But then within those parameters, it's complete athlete freedom. Go figure it out. And so the phrase just really means listen to your arm throughout the entire journey of your playing career. What feels good for you? What puts you in the best position for success on a given day, right? When I was a starter, I had an hour and 15-minute routine. I'd go out an hour and 15 minutes before first pitch, and I knew exactly what I needed to do with my mind, body, and arm to put me in the best position to succeed. That was at age 20, right? I had to develop that from high school on and figure out what worked for me. And so listen to your arm just means over the course of your career, you do the work and you have intention when you throw. Don't go out half-ass and throw, excuse the language, but just committing to throws, talking to your buddy about what you did the night before, have intention with your arm, have intention with your throws, and figure out what's going on in there so that the next day you know what to do or what not to do based on the previous day. And after enough days in a row, you have enough data to where you've listened to your arm enough and you know exactly what you need to do to put yourself in a position to succeed for yourself, for your team, for your program, for your coach, and so on and so forth. And so listen to your arm is discipline, doing the work, collecting the data, and implementing that data the next day.
All right, so if I'm a high school or college player, even a middle school player, how can I, and I should be long tossing, how can I implement this just on day to day? How do I know when to push through things? A little bit of soreness that I can push through and I can still have a good long toss day today. How do I know when, okay, that's enough, I'm going to shut it down today, because I feel like if I keep going, I'm going to end up, probably altering some mechanics and compensating in some way and probably causing injury at some point now or shortly after that. And if I'm a coach, how do I speak to my players about this just a little more in depth and just talking day to day? Because on a particular day, if you have a team of 20 guys, you're going to have a handful of guys that are really going to air it out on a particular day, a handful of guys that are going to, have a decent stretch but not really aired out to, to full capacity, and some other guys that might only be, I don't know, at 60 or 70% of max just because of other stuff they've done. I just want to kind of bring it to, a day-to-day applicable conversation. So can you talk about, like, you as a pitcher, maybe even just what you experience day to day, how exactly you listen to your arm and how you let that affect or dictate how much you threw on particular days?
Right. No, yeah, it's a great question. And so the first thing, if people want to, like, do a deep dive on schedules and quantity, and we do have a schedule, and it's free on our website. It's an article. It's a little girthy, not gonna lie. But if you scroll down on the Jaeger Sports website, in the media, Jaeger Sports in the news, there's a bunch of articles written, most of them written by Allen Jaeger, and he has off-season schedule, off-season throwing schedule, and in-season throwing schedule that will literally give you a map of what he's seen over the decades of a basic guideline, right? And he says so many disclaimers in there, rightfully so, that these are guidelines, do what feels best for you. But he'll literally have, like, Monday of week 1, here's what you do. And then you go. So if you want to do a deep dive on that, I would highly recommend going there. Like I said, it's free, because me going through that would be a long answer. But for myself, the example I will give for myself as a pitcher is, let's say, like in college, my start day was Friday. So Friday would actually be one of my best long toss days. I'd open it up before the game, stretching it out. And obviously I'm in great shape. This is in season at that point. So I'm in what we call, like, beast mode. You've got the foundation built. We're not talking about taking an arm from square one for a 4 to 6 week buildup. I'm already there. So start day Friday. So Friday, I'm opening up with, like, crazy stretching out as far as I can go out. I'm pulling down at about 70%, so I'm not fully pulling down because I'm saving some of that for the bullpen and then into the game. And so that's one of my best long toss days, Fridays. Saturdays, we were not required to throw. I liked to throw, and it was like a 100-foot throw for 15, 20 minutes, no line drives or anything. I'm just throwing basically like I'm throwing an egg to my partner and trying not to break it. Just very soft throws just to flush out the arm on Saturday, and I would usually do that Saturday and Sunday. Monday would be like a 60% long toss day. I'm still kind of in recovery mode, just kind of letting my arm recover. So I'd go out to 60% of my max distance. I'd pull down at 60%. Tuesday, beast mode day. I'm launching balls. I'm pulling down. I'm doing a great bullpen. Wednesday, probably about 160 to 210 feet flush day. Thursday, I would do a pretty good long toss, but not pull down. So I'd stretch it out to, like, max distance, but not pull down, just to not create too much scar tissue or swelling in there. And then Friday, we're off and running again. So that's kind of an in-season look at what my schedule was based on years of listening to my arm and knowing what would work. Is I'm launching twice a week, which one of those days was start day. One of those was 2 days before start, or 3 days, I guess, technically, with Tuesday. And then the other days, I'm just feeling it out. Sometimes it's 50%, sometimes it's 70%.
And if there's a high school coach listening to this who's dealing with very amateur athletes, guys, some guys that will play in college, a bunch of guys who won't, but hopefully a team that's committed to having a good season and doing as well as they can. Is it fair for a coach to go out and kind of tell his guys from day to day, like, listen to your arm today? Because these guys, high school players, they're on much less of a schedule than you were, obviously, in college. High school, you might have some sort of a schedule when you're always gonna start on this day, but a lot of times, especially in Pennsylvania, there are games being canceled. There are weeks when you have 1 or 2 games because of weather, and there are games you're gonna have 4 or 5 games, and you're just not exactly sure when you're gonna throw next. That's just kind of the life of high school baseball players a lot of times. Is it fair for a high school coach to say to his players just to listen to your arm today and do what you feel like you're capable of? And if at any point you feel like this is too much for today, then you need to shut it down. But if your arm feels good today, regardless of when you think you might pitch next or when you pitch last, if your arm feels good today, obviously, unless, like you said, on a day, if you're sure you're going to start tomorrow, there should be some limitation, like you said, without the pull downs. But besides that scenario, you think you're going to start a couple days from now, or you just started a couple days ago, but your arm feels really good today. Maybe you threw 40 pitches in relief a couple days ago or whatever. Your arm feels great. Is it fair for a high school coach just to say to his players in the long toss phase, listen to your arm and, don't push it beyond, to a point where you're having some pain and discomfort. But as long as your arm continues to feel good as you're stretching it out, go ahead and stretch it out as far as you're able to. And that's just listen to the feedback your arm is giving you and long toss accordingly. Is that just a fair generalization for a coach to use to his players and to encourage them to really to push themselves, but also just to feel when their arm is telling them, all right, this is enough for today? Is that a fair way to say it, China, just for a high school coach talking to just a general high school team that has got a varying degree of athletes and abilities on one field together?
Yeah, no, and it's such a crucial point, because I would actually say, like, for high school coaches that are listening, I would encourage a high school coach almost to dictate a little more power, because you're dealing with developing athletes and they might not know what's best. So, like, if a high school coach educates himself, is listening to this, takes a look at the article and kind of sees what the schedule looks like, sees what the progression, and obviously most high school coaches played, so kind of what worked for you when you played and whatnot. That's where the guidance comes in with the players, and you go on the journey together. So if you see a guy's not pushing himself really, you can explain to him why it's better to kind of progress a little faster, go out a little farther. And the approach I like to use with anything that I teach, Jeff and I have talked about this, is the what, why, how approach, right? So if you get with your players when you're first starting your year program, right? So if we're in the fall, you explain the what. What throwing program are you doing, right? It's Jaeger Sports, or it's a long toss throwing progression. Here's kind of how it looks. Here's a map of it, 4 to 6 weeks, building a foundation. After we get there, we do this, blah, blah, blah. So that's the what. The why will this help my player, right? Why will this help our program? You explain to them exactly why you're doing it. We're going to have healthy arms. We're going to be beasts on defense. We're going to have 9 guys on the field at all times that can throw missiles all over the diamond. Nobody's going to want to run on us. We're going to feel good. We're going to recover better. That's the why, right? That accomplishes the buy-in. And then how do we do this, right? How are we going to do this? Here's what we're going to do on a daily basis. We're going to do arm circles as a team. We're going to do J-bands as a team, so we know all of our arms are prepped for the act of throwing. Before we warm up, we long toss together. We do our infield, outfield, whatever it is. Here's how we're going to implement it. And so if you cover the what, why, how, and it's very clear to the players what it is, why we're doing it, and how we're going to implement it, there'll be more buy-in, and there'll be an easier communication between coach-player on a day where it's like, hey, remember why we're doing this? It doesn't look like you're pushing. Or, hey, your mechanics are getting really wonky right now at your max distance. I think you're a little too far. I think you need to bring it back in so you can be comfortable with your mechanics and still get it to travel the distance because your head's flying off or whatnot. But if you establish that relationship with the program and there's intention, it's like anything else you teach your players. There's going to be more buy-in, and they're going to feel like you're doing it together, where it's not that dictator type thing where it's like you have to do this, you have to that. It's like, let's see what's in these arms and let's become beasts together. That's going to help implement this culture and implement the program to the best of its ability for sure.
So I'm going to ask you a why question now. Why does the combination of J-bands and long toss, why is that going to work for most guys? Maybe someone who's never tried it before and is a little hesitant, or a coach who's maybe been around for 30 years and his players have been, from the time when he was a kid and he played until now, like it was always just you just go and throw and warm up. And maybe he really hasn't had a lot of guys that have had arm issues, so he's a little bit like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of thing. But just kind of answer this question for me: why does the combination of J-bands plus long toss, why is that going to work for an individual, for a team, whatever it may be? Why is this a good plan going forward? Why is this going to work with guys?
Yeah, no, that's a great question and unique question. I don't think I've ever answered directly, so I love those types of questions. The why behind the J-bands is just science. Medical people, much smarter than myself, have just done the work and done the controlled experiments and all that stuff with resistance bands and the activation of the shoulder complex, rotator cuff, and the throwing specific muscle groups. So you have two groups in these experiments. One doesn't do bands and they go throw. One does do bands and they go throw. The group with the bands, with all those crazy machines hooked up to them and those electromagnetic things that, again, it's over my head, but that arm is much more healthy and much more prepared. There's less scar tissue, less swelling when you do bands before you throw. So that's the why behind the band. It's just science. It's a fact. It's been proven by studies. The long toss is still a topic that people will debate, and you can see it on Twitter, and Allen's dealt with it for years. Because a lot of people like linear throwing, repeatable mechanics. And our counter to that is when you're going out and you're throwing long toss and you're progressing and you're stretching out and you're throwing the ball with arc and different angles, you're opening up the shoulder. This is about physical, right? This isn't about mechanical or repeating at this point. The stretching out part of the long toss progression is just about opening up the arm, getting the arm stronger. When you throw the ball with arc and you throw at these different distances, your shoulder is operating and performing at a bunch of different angles, as opposed to if you just throw linear 120 feet over and over and over, it's performing at one angle. It's not opening up. It's not evolving. You're not fully opening up your shoulder complex to where it's going to bring out the maximum potential velocity in there. It's just science, really, too, or physics, if you're opening up the shoulder with arc all the way out. The pull-down phase, when you come back in, so let's say we go out today, Jeff and I long toss to 330 feet, and then we come back in, and every throw on our pull-down phase is 330 feet mentality. That's what we tell our guys. And when they get it, you can see it, and it's magical. Every throw for the rest of the day is 330 feet. The only difference is extension, focal point, and release point to continue to hit your partner or hit your target. And so if I come back into 60 feet 6 inches after I just open up my arm to 330 feet and I compress that 330 foot throw into 60 feet 6 inches, I am guaranteeing my maximum velocity on that day, period. Because I've opened it up the max distance I can go, and then if I can mentally commit, which it's a mental commitment that you'll see with the guys, that they have to make an adjustment. Because if you haven't done it, we've seen it at camps, and we actually prefer guys to make mistakes when it first occurs. They'll come back into about 100 feet, and we'll tell them, hey, this is still a 300-foot throw, and they'll launch it over their partner because they're used to aiming, and they're used to making sure they hit the target. And so it's a mental adjustment to really get them to focus on their max distance throw mentally. But long-winded answer, the why, J-bands is science. The why behind the long toss is you're exposing the shoulder complex to so many different angles, opening it up. It's physically healthier for you. You get to know your arm better, and it gets much more feel throughout an entire year of doing the program.
All right, I'm going to keep challenging you here a little bit.
I love it.
At one of my stops as a college coach, I recruited a player from a junior college to a 4-year school who came in, and he really did not like to throw between starts. He would start, he would be, pretty sore, as most guys are, and basically he would not throw much between starts, and this was very atypical. Everybody else on our team at this time We had a great pitching coach at this particular stop, and most of the guys did exactly what you're talking about between starts. In college, you've got 7 days. As a pro, you have 5 days from start to start, and most guys kind of had a similar program to what you mentioned, where they were doing a lot of throwing between. It's and a lot of long tossing between, whereas this player didn't like to throw like hardly at all. And his mental approach to this was that, he was sore. He wanted to give himself as much time to rest and recover as possible. And I can sympathize with that in a way. If you're someone that likes to lift, maybe you haven't lifted in a long time or haven't lifted really hard for a while, and then one day you have a really hard lift, and your legs just it feels like your legs each weigh 100 pounds, and it's hard to like bend down to tie your shoes for a couple days in a row, and you're like, man, I lifted too hard. I'm going to take some time off before I really get back in there again. I'm going to let myself recover and let the soreness get out. At least that's how I've approached that in the past when I've had that kind of day where I lifted too much and got too sore. I'm not going to go like 2 days later and try to push it because I'm still dealing with soreness. I can feel where he's coming from in a way. But I also knew, based on other guys, other pitchers, and just what I know about baseball, I just knew that wasn't going to work. But I wasn't the pitching coach, and I wasn't the one having conversations with him. And ultimately, throughout the course of this season, he didn't buy into throwing a lot, throwing between starts, stretching it out, long tossing. He really just wanted to rest between starts, and that's kind of what he wanted to do. If you had this player in front of you, China, and you were having this conversation with him, what would you say to him? How would you try to convince him that this, ultimately for his long-term health and his and what he's going to be able to do this season, he really needs to try this and buy into it? Because obviously in his position, again, he's thinking, well, if I go throw, I'm not going to do something different, because if I go throw and now I'm sore for my next start, it's not going to go well. I might get hurt. I might lose my spot in the rotation. So you can see where he's hesitant to change things because he's trying to perform in season, right? So what kind of a conversation would you have with this player?
Yeah, it's such a fun question, really. The issue for me would be the in-season part, because once we get in season, like, we'll have dads and parents come to us about, they want to do our orientation during the season, and we don't do that. We don't make changes during a season because you're not dictating basically everything. Like, he's got a start coming up, right? So if we try to make changes and it does go bad, or he does get a different soreness, it is going to affect his start. It's going to put him in a bad spot. So during the season, the conversation would be just, what is best for you? What's the thought process behind it? And then if he's fully bought in and that's the way he feels, I would have to accept that as a coach and let it go. The conversation I would have with him would be after the season, or first, like for me, if I didn't know him, my first questions would be all about his preparation and what did he do in the off season. Because if he's that sore between starts to where he feels like it's better for him to not throw, there was an issue with his preparation and an issue with his throwing program building up. Because if you build the base right and you get everything in place before you start throwing pens, before you start doing any incline throwing with max effort, you're gonna be sore. I mean, it's an unnatural movement. You still get sore, but day 2, day 3, you start to feel great. You want to throw, you want to work on things. And so my conversation with him in season would be finding out why the conviction is so strong with him, and if it all makes sense to me and that's the way he feels, I have to let him do what he's got to do in season, especially if he's performing. And then it would be all about, we're going to change things this off season because you're not going to do this next year. You're not going to, not in a disciplinary way, just for a fun and health wise for him. We're going to build this thing right in the off season, and you're going to feel much different next season, and you're going to get stronger and better throughout the season. And instead of holding on for dear life just to try to get through. Because that's another thing we see with the long toss and the progression is guys will build endurance throughout the season as opposed to getting, into those dog days and getting tired where they're just holding on for dear life to get to the end of the season.
And without, I was at this stop, I was the recruiting coordinator. I missed a good bit of time. I missed a good number of days in the fall recruiting, and same thing in the spring. I don't remember it being an issue in the fall. Maybe it was, and again, it was a number of years ago. I didn't really become aware of it really until the spring. But in the fall in college is a little bit different because in the fall in college you're not really stretching out as much. I don't think guys throw more than 2 or 3 innings in an outing in the fall because you have limited days, because you're trying to get a lot of guys to throw, because guys had just thrown in summer, and just a lot of different factors. They don't stretch out quite as much as they do in the spring. And I don't know if that had something to do with it didn't really fully come to light until the spring or whatever. But that's someone that just will stand out to me forever because, and I don't know if this is because of the way that he prepared or what, but he is a player that never had the success I thought he should. In fact, when he got to us, he wasn't. He threw harder in junior college than he did for us, and just is a guy that I thought was going to take another step forward, but instead took a step backwards, and just didn't have a great rest of end of his career with us. So just again, a question I thought I would ask in case you never know when someone out there is dealing with something similar to what you've dealt with in the past.
Right, absolutely.
So I want to switch gears, China, for the rest of this podcast. I know we don't have a lot of time left. I've kept you for quite a while already, but I would like to talk with you about the foundation that you have, Athletes Against Anxiety and Depression, and again, that website is aaadf.org, and just talk to you briefly about why you started it, and what it is, who you help, and what kind of players should reach out to you, players that are in certain situations or just need help with this or that. I just kind of want to get to know a little bit about that, and for anyone that's listening to this, want them to get to know a little bit more about what you're doing in addition to what you do with Jaeger.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So I started the foundation in 2016. What originally I had done is I did a social media movement for the month of November, and I just shared my own personal mental health story. And the response to that on social media, again, this is 5 years ago, mental health's become more and more mainstream, which is awesome. But 5 years ago, it wasn't such, and I had kept it hidden from everybody forever. And the response to that was so incredible that I knew I had to do something more than just the social media movement. And so got a 501c3 lawyer and people that are smarter than me to help me found it. But the reason I started it, I had my first panic attack in 2009, which was my junior season in college, the big draft year. A lot was going on. And I thought I was having a heart attack. I was driving. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what a panic attack was at that point, and then went to the doctor to find out, how bad of a heart attack I had or something, and they were like, no, this was a panic attack. And I was like, wait, that terrible experience I just had was because of my mind. And so it just set me into a little bit of a funk. And so from 2009 to 2015, I just struggled in silence. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't want to be, perceived as weak. I thought I was the only one dealing with this stuff, and it got very dark, depression, just feeling very alone. And then in 2015, I had ordered a burger at the Habit, yum, and I couldn't go in to get my food because I was having such a bad panic attack. All I had to do was go in and grab my food. I couldn't do it. And so that was kind of my rock bottom in that parking lot. I was just sitting there alone crying and just like, I need help. And so I got therapy in 2015, and that kind of started the healing and started where I just realized that there were so many people struggling and I wasn't alone in this journey. And I wanted to do something in my arena, which my arena is athletics, real world, normal people, and let people know that you can have a mental health issue going on and still be living a great life. And, which most people are. Most people that are dealing with mental health issues are still living great lives, and it's just something that you got to deal with. And so I just wanted to create something that gave people permission to be all of who they were, and be proud of it, and to realize it's okay to not be okay sometimes. And that's what it's about. It's about getting that message out there, and then our resources are our biggest resource with the funds that we raise is we provide free therapy to anybody that's struggling. It doesn't have to be an athlete. If you're struggling, you can reach out to the website. We get you connected with therapists and pay for those sessions for you, because I know sometimes therapy can be expensive, and then through health insurance it can be a lot of red tape you got to get through just to get your first step of help, and we don't want that at all. And so it's been an amazing journey. It's kind of my competition that I have now since I'm retired, and my body doesn't listen to me when I say go anymore. My knees hurt, my elbows hurt. So my competition is just trying to make advancements in the mental health space, get as many people help as possible, and do it in a fun, normal, real world way where there's no judgment, and it's just normal people dealing with what people deal with. So that's kind of the little two minute spiel there.
All that is really, really cool. So what level of athletes do you all help? I mean, who can reach out to you? Do you help primarily professional athletes, or at lower levels? Just kind of curious. In what sports? Like, who, if any, depending who's listening to this, who is sort of eligible to reach out for help?
Yeah. So anybody listening, primarily because of the name and because of my connection, it has been athletes, and it's been I'd say the most common person that reach out is high school athletes. High school's always been difficult, but it's even more difficult now with social media and judgment and different things. And so there's a lot, especially with the pandemic, man, and the virtual schooling and just a lot of things. But we've helped, 60-year-old in Germany. We've helped a 13-year-old over here, and there's no requirements really to get help. If you need help, you just reach out, and we'll find the resource that works best for you. It's not always free therapy. One of my, I don't even know, greatest accomplishments, I guess, one of the coolest things that gives me goosebumps is one of the teenagers that reached out last year. He's a really high-level basketball player in North Carolina, and he had already gotten therapy. He just wanted more real-world help, and so through some discussions him and I had, he actually founded his own 501c3 suicide awareness mental health foundation in North Carolina. It got approved, and so we facilitated that. We paid for his fees and everything, and so there's no cookie-cutter resource. If you need help, let's just talk like normal people and figure out what the help is gonna look like for you. But that was really cool, and he's helping people with his story now too. So there's no one way to do it. It's just if you're struggling. I know I struggled for 6 years by myself. Just know that there are people struggling as well. You're not alone, and if you need help, it's just an email. You can, there's no judgment, there's no bias. You just email, and it's going to be a friendly email back, just like, hey, let's do this. Let's compete. Let's get help. Let's get some resources and make the world a little better.
How did you get to a point, China, where you were ready to tell people about your struggles? Because that must have been a huge step for you. And I know that you and I have talked, before in our personal conversations that I've gone through some things myself, and I'm sure a lot of people listening have. One of the things that you've done that I haven't is tell a lot of people about it. I have said it I've said, kind of brief bits and pieces on this podcast before. I don't really talk with individuals much about just my personal struggles, just because it, kind of like you said, it's just, it's a little bit taboo. I don't want people to judge me. I don't want people that don't know me, to think things about me that I don't want them to think about me, I guess is a weird way to say it. But how did you get to a point in your own journey where you were ready to just tell people what you had personally gone through?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm just kind of visualizing the way the journey went. Is therapy. I went to therapy, and I didn't tell anybody I was going to therapy. My dad knew. My dad's my best friend, and he had gotten therapists, recommended for me, but I was like, I don't want, blah, blah, blah. And so when I started going to therapy and my therapist started telling me statistics or, just different things about how prevalent it was, and that it's okay, she gave me permission. That's the word I always use. She gave me permission to just accept this. And so I started telling my close friends, and some of them aren't in my life anymore because of my anxiety. Like, they couldn't deal with it, or they thought it was weird, or they thought it was an excuse. And so that's been a journey over the last 5 or 6 years of just eliminating people from my life that won't be human about this issue, which that's a very difficult thing. But 95% of the people just love you, care what you want to be in your life for the right reasons. And so when you start to have those conversations and they go well, it's like, oh my gosh, why have I been holding on to this? And so then I just started telling more and more people. And then, we're on this podcast because of Jaeger Sports. Allen Jaeger and Jim Batcher, the two owners of Jaeger Sports, I did an article last year, Bloomberg Business Week did a profile about mental health in the workplace, and they interviewed me, and I got emotional because Allen and Jim are so just real people, and they just care. And I've been there for 22 years. We're all best friends. Jim's going to officiate my wedding. Allen's going to be there. It's like we're a family. But if they weren't so incredible and accepting, and Allen is so obviously progressive in the mental health space, and Jim keeps it light and funny, I don't know what I would have done. Because there are times at work where I've had a panic attack and I have to leave. And it's like, you can't do that in some jobs, and some people aren't understanding. And so that made it really easy for me to share as well, where they, my two leaders, my two bosses are so like, hey, you okay? Do you need anything? Do you want us to pay for therapy? Do you blah, blah, blah? That helped tremendously. And then I don't really know, like, the one thing that kind of led me to that in November, to do that on social media, because I was terrified in a good way. And at the end of October of that year, I wasn't going to do it. I had told my best friend, who's actually in the next room here in my house in Arizona, John Spenlove, that I was going to do this in November, and I started having cold feet towards the end of October, and he kind of gave me like the warrior, like, you got to do this, man. This is going to be huge for you. I know it is. Just please do it. And so he kind of gave me that nudge, and I did it in November, and the reaction was, why we're here talking 5 years later about the foundation and everything like that. So I know it's a long-winded answer. I just, going through the specifics of the journey, I think helps people at times. Just, it wasn't like this one day where I was like, I can share now. I had to progressively go through, my parents, my best friends, and then once that reaction was good, that kind of exponential effect started to occur where I just started to be honest with people. And my fiance now, the first day I met her, I told her I had panic attacks, because that's where I was at in the journey. That now I just lead with it so people know, so that if I have to walk away or anything, there isn't this awkward energy or fear about it. It's just, this is who I am, it's what I deal with, and we're all going through something, so nothing to be ashamed about.
The honesty is amazing, and that that we're all going through something is true, whether people will admit it or not. Whether people want to listen to your story or anybody else's story. To me, if people can't relate, even if they never have gone through anything as severe as you, but if they just can't relate, or they can't just see, like you said, this is a very human thing to go through, I feel like they're just denying their own feelings, and they just, like, they've never maybe have come to grips with things that they've struggled with, because I think everyone struggles with things to a degree. Obviously, everyone struggles to a different degree, but everyone is currently going through something. And if you can't relate to other people, I have a hard time believing that you're really just being honest with yourself. And your level of honesty is just really amazing to me. And so that's what you just decided you were just going to come out and be honest and tell people exactly what you've been going through, and kind of whatever the reaction is, the reaction. Is that what you did? You just sort of opened up and said, hey, I've been dealing with this for 6 years. These things have happened. Did you tell people, like, I'd love to hear your story? Did you tell people, like, if you want to reach out to me and talk, you're welcome to? Or did you just kind of share and say, hey, here it is, do what you will with it?
Yeah, no. So when I first shared it, I had researched the different organizations that were out there. The Anxiety and Depression Association of America had a great website. And so when I shared, I just said, if you're going through anything, there are resources. Here's an example. And kind of through that research part of trying to find different resources for people, I couldn't really find like that real world, which now there's tons of them, which is great. But back then, I couldn't really find one that like grabbed me. It was very scientific community, medical community approach. And I was like, man, that's not as inviting or comfortable as just like a normal real world approach to mental health, which is the phrase I use now. And so that was what kind of got me going on the foundation path. But when I first shared, I said, if you want to DM me, which I got a ton of DMs about people or from people that were struggling, and they said, don't tell anybody because they're, that stigma's real. But I said they could contact me, or I said they could check out the website when I first shared.
Why social media, China? Why did you go to social media to sort of take the next step in telling people and sort of telling your story?
I think at that time, so the first step was like my inner circle, like I said. So I did that kind of all face-to-face or via text, and just like with buddies, there'd be stuff that I said no to that they were like, why are you saying no to going to this game or going to Vegas or this and that? And I would use some lame excuse. And so when I kind of approach it with them, I'm like, look, this is what I've been dealing with. That's why these things occurred. So with them, it was easy. And that was face-to-face. The social media thing, I think it's just the easiest way to reach the masses with a message, right? Like people that follow you, if people share it, it was just the easiest way for me to basically have a conversation with 500 people in one post instead of trying to individually address it. And then I have a very, I don't know the word to use, biased view towards social media now, and always have. But I thought it would be unique on social media to share something like that instead of a photo that's filtered about your waffles. Let's have some substance. And that's what I've always tried to do on social media, is show the behind the curtain to real life of like, hey, I had to leave dinner with my fiance tonight because I had a panic attack. Like, that's real, right? Instead of, this stuff's cool, but I feel like we present an image on social media that we want people to see instead of presenting ourselves on social media, and just being who we are, which, based on conversations I've had with teenagers and the parents that call the foundation, social media is one of the scariest weapons going on in our country right now. It's taking a very brutal toll on the teens and just trying to compete, and present a certain image of themselves and stuff like that. So I just try to use social media just to do something a little different and try to make a positive impact on there with some real world stories.
And thank goodness that you do. My wife and I talk about social media a lot. So we've got 3 little kids at home, and the oldest is 7, and it's like, as parents of a 7-year-old, like, I don't want her to get to be old enough to use social media, because I just can imagine how cruel you talked a while back just about, going to high school now and just how kids have always been cruel to each other, but now they just have different and much easier ways of being cruel to each other, much more convenient ways. You don't have to do it to somebody's face anymore with social media. You can be really cruel to somebody without ever actually looking them in the face, or doing it right in front of someone as opposed to doing it behind their back. But we talk about social media a lot in our house, and my wife will even talk just about her own experiences and about how friends of ours, or just acquaintances, more than friends, just people only post on social media when things are going well most of the time, and they'll post perfect pictures of them and their kids and their family, and make it, just their posts will make it look like they have everything together in their life. Every aspect of their life, they have it completely together, and that's the image. And whether people try to do that or not, just most people just by instinct, I think, aren't going to post on the bad days, and aren't going to post on a bad hair day, and aren't going to post on a day when they feel down, but they will post when things are going well, or they'll post this, a post-workout picture where, they're swollen, they look terrific in this cutoff shirt or whatever it is. And that's just the image that people present on social media. And if you spend enough time on social media, that can give you a bad self-image because, like you said, there's comparison. There's you know how imperfect your own life is, but everyone else's life, according to social media, is perfect. And it's nice, I think, and very refreshing and very real to have people who use social media to present who they really are, as opposed to presenting this a perfect image of themselves. So it's always refreshing to me. And when you take that the leap on social media like you did to just kind of come out and say, hey, this is the real me. This is who I really am. It's not pretty all the time, and but it is real, and I'm not going to hide who I am. Like, that's not an easy thing to do, and I'm sure in your situation when you start to get cold feet, you have part of that is probably you don't know what reaction you're going to get from people, and that can be pretty scary.
Right.
And I think it's a great thing that you did, and I think that I wish more people would use social media in that way personally. A question that I get, and this is the last question I'm going to ask you, China, probably. I don't want to promise on that. But I get the question with Figured Out Baseball sometimes when people realize that I don't make money from this website. I pay other people, but I don't take any money from it, and I'll just, people know that I spend a lot of time on it, and I'll get questions from people sometimes just like, what do you get out of this? Why do you want to do this? Why would you spend so much time on something that you don't make anything from? And it's an easy answer for me, but I'm going to ask you that same question. What do you get out of your foundation? What do you get out of running Athletes Against Anxiety and Depression? Why do you do it?
I love that question. To answer it in one word would be everything. I mean, it helps me tremendously to keep mental health prevalent in my life and continue to study about it and try things out in my own life to see if they help. And then the biggest thing is saving lives. And I know that, like, to people listening and be like, well, okay, come on. But it's like, I've gotten calls from parents after their teenager has committed suicide, and they want to be involved with the foundation to help so that it doesn't happen to anybody else. And small acts, like very small acts, can literally save people's lives, can change people's lives. And sometimes that act is just knowing that something is there or that someone cares. And that's what I get out of it. When I get the calls from the kid in Pittsburgh in North Carolina, when he got the approval letter that his foundation is, approved through the government and he's good to go, and he's got just such joy, where when the first time I had talked to him, we were in a very different mental state with him, and it's just the journey and just building that team. I don't get to compete anymore the way I'd like to, and so this is a different sort of competition where there's a fire inside me every single day to just try to do something. And when I write the 1,000 emails and I get one response, it's like that one response is worth 999 no's or 999 non-responses, and it gets very grindy sometimes and depressing, honestly, where you're like, people, why aren't you responding, or why aren't you doing this? But then that one call comes through and it just makes it all worthwhile. And, it's the same way, like you said, with Figured Out Baseball. For AAAD, not only, like, we get donations, and that's what pays for the therapy and stuff like that, but, like, there's no money, there's no staff, nobody's making money. With all the donations, 100% of it goes back towards resources. And, like, year over year, 2016 to now, it's a net negative. Like, if you just look at the financials for myself personally, is I'm putting money into it because that's how passionate I am about it, and I don't care about that part. So, yeah, I mean, I get so much out of it personally, and then just the calls with different teams, different people, and the events we put on. I just love hearing people talk about mental health without tension in their throat. And it's just it's becoming more and more normal to talk about, and that's going to save tons of lives in the future. So yeah, I get everything out of it, and sweet hats to cover up my bald head.
And I'm going to be purchasing one of those hats myself. I didn't realize they were for sale until today, and I don't know when this podcast will air exactly, but that's something you do fairly often, right? Like if people want to, first of all, if they want to donate, I assume that they can do so through the website, but you also have, like, you sell hats on a fairly regular basis. How else tell me some ways that people can contribute if they want to AAAD, if they're listening to this and it's something that they feel passionate about. How can someone get a hold of you or do some good, throw some money your way to be used in a positive way to someone who's struggling? How do people do that?
Yeah, so the website, AAADF.org, so AAADF.org. Like one of the tabs, it's a very simple, sleek design, and one of the tabs is literally donate, and it's got the tax ID number. All donations are tax exempt or tax deductible, and you can do that with credit card, PayPal, all that good stuff. And then on social media, at China McCarney, so just like the country, CHINA, and then McCarney's MCCARNEY. That's all my handles, and I'm very good about, like, DMs. If you DM me with a question, or like with the hats, we don't have like an official store or anything. It's just if you make a $50 donation and DM me, because I get all the alerts for the donations, then I'll send you a hat. And we have 6 styles right now that are pretty sweet. And so, yeah, it's very, very low key, very easy. And like I said, I think people listening can tell by now I'm pretty honest and easygoing. So if you contact me with some questions, I'll get back to you and go from there.
This has been awesome. This is China McCarney, everybody. He's the vice president and CFO of Jaeger Sports. Of course, that we talked, for the majority of this podcast about J-bands and different things that Jaeger promotes, particularly long toss. He's also the founder of Athletes Against Anxiety and Depression. China, this has been thoroughly enjoyable for me. I like having different kinds of guests on here. You and I have connected now several times, and I think I've enjoyed every conversation we've had more than the previous one. I just want to personally thank you for taking the time to be on here and talk about all this stuff. I know sometimes in these podcasts I ask questions that maybe push you to your limits a little bit, or even beyond the limits of what you typically get asked or need to talk about, or even some things maybe you're not 100% comfortable with, but the honesty and everything you've shared has been very, very beneficial for everyone listening. So I just want to personally thank you for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, no, and I know as the host, you do all the asking of the questions and everything. But for anybody listening out there, Jeff and I have known each other now for probably only a couple months. We've spoken on the phone, I think, 4 times, and emailed and everything. And just getting to know you and looking at what you do with Figured Out Baseball, and we're wired in a very similar way, and like AAAD is my Figured Out Baseball is your AAAD, and it's just so refreshing. You do things, like, for any of the listeners that probably already know because they're in your base, but you just do things for the right reasons. You have such a unique passion for the game of baseball in the right way, where it's not about what you're getting out of it, it's what you're putting back into it, and it's just evident in everything that you do, the passion and the way you communicate. And it's just been an honor and an awesome privilege to get to know you. And I know we're going to work together in the future. And just wanted to make sure people know how just committed you are to the game. I mean, with Jaeger Sports, we come across thousands of people, obviously. And the baseball community is great in its own right. But you just have such a unique passion and motor, and it's awesome to watch, and what you do for the game and give back, and with Figured Out Baseball is just incredible. So thank you for who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you. That means a really great deal, to have some unsolicited things said about you like that, and especially, as you know, with AAAD, sometimes you do a lot of work for very little recognition. So to have someone that to say something like that, it means a lot to me personally. And I was not expecting that, but I really appreciate it, and it means a lot. I'm looking forward to having you involved with Figured Out Baseball in other ways, and hopefully at some point there will be some China McCarney videos on the Figured Out website, so you all can get to know China better and to put a face with a name here, and just see some other things that he can do in ways that he can help you. And hopefully this is an ongoing relationship. So China, again, I thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to a continued relationship with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff.